Hey guys, and welcome to Stuff with Steffi. As you can tell, I don't have makeup on, so I kind of figured why not just do makeup and record a video as I go and see if it turns out fine. So, yeah. Gonna get a weird glow for most of this. Okay, so let's do some makeup. So I figured I'd do makeup and just sort of like tell stories. And I don't know why, but lately I've been feeling like I've just been thinking a lot about stories that my grandparents have told about like ghosts and aliens and just like supernatural beings. And like it also I guess I just started thinking about it as well. Of course, Halloween is coming up. It's this Saturday. Just sort of ended up getting me thinking about aliens and ghosts. And I've been wanting to like try to write a book. Well, I'm in the process of making a children's book. And I was thinking about trying to write another, like trying to write one about the boogeyman. Because when I was little, my dad's mom, she used to always tell us that the boogeyman lives in the closet. Like, there were rooms in her house that she'd tell us the boogeyman would live in. And I was so scared to go in them. I was a very wussy child. And, like, she had reasons for telling us, like, for trying to scare us to stay out of the rooms. Because, like, one of them had guns in it, one of them had a bunch of chemicals in the water heater. So, I mean, I get why she told us that, but for the longest time I was scared to even go around those rooms on my own. And I was really little when this started. It was like, I don't know, the earliest I can remember her saying it, I was 4 years old. So I grew up hearing that the boogeyman was here, the boogeyman was there, and that if we went into any of those rooms, the boogeyman would take us away and she wouldn't be able to get us back. So I've been like, I don't know why, but I kind of want to turn that into a children's book. Like, you know. But it also got me thinking about like what other kinds of stories she would tell when we were little. And my grandma on my father's side, she always would, like, my entire life, she was always really big on like respecting the dead. And I do honestly believe she believed in ghosts. Especially because of her claim that her and one of her older brothers saw one. Was he older? I don't know if he was older, actually. Her and one of her brothers, she claimed, saw one at the house that she lived in the entire time that my entire life. But she once told me about the time her and her brother saw a ghost. So I'm from eastern Kentucky, and there are a lot of hills, and so her house sort of sat right in front of this hill, and then it was in a valley, and there was a hill on the other side, and if you went up, there was a road winding up and around the hill, and if you went up, there was a graveyard. And she told me about, sorry, I gotta work the primer in. She told me once about how she was sitting out on the porch with her brother and they were smoking. So they were both smokers for the longest time. And it was getting dark, so they were just sitting there talking. And they looked out, and coming down off of the hill, like off the hill where they were just, they were facing that they were looking at, So coming down from the graveyard, they just saw this glowing green orb. And my grandma told me that that they both decided it was a ghost. Like, they both decided it was definitely some kind of ghost, and they just sort of hightailed it inside. And she was telling me about it because I was really into supernatural beings at the time. Like, I read a lot of old folk stories, including one about, it's like the Kentucky Goblins or something like that, and I think I had mentioned the Kentucky Goblins because they're basically there's an old folk story about these, like, glowing hobgoblins sort of things. I can't remember if they glow green or they glow blue, but they're just supposed to, like, glow. I think I brought that up, and that's why she mentioned the glowing orb. And we were sitting on our porch, and it was about sundown. And I don't think I've ever seen her. Like, it was sunset, and I don't think I've ever seen her outside of her. Well, I don't think I ever did see her outside of her house after dark. Which would make sense, because, you know, she believed in ghosts and whatnot. Honestly, I think that's my favorite story that my grandmother has ever told me, was about seeing a glowing orb coming down the hill. Oh yeah, and for anyone thinking it's weird that I'm doing my eye makeup first, I just find it easier this way. I can always just, you know, if I go too far up, I can just cover that. My mom's parents, though, they don't really, as far as I'm aware, they don't believe in a whole lot of supernatural beings. So it's kind of weird that my grandfather told my brother about the time he met an alien. My grandfather, the entire time he was working, he worked with explosives. He was the guy you'd go to see how much you need, and he would be in charge of the blast sites and stuff, as far as I'm aware. And at one point, he did explosives in the military. And he had a rank that doesn't even exist anymore, and I don't know what it is. My grandma showed me his discharge papers, and he's still alive. It's just nobody's asked him what it is, because he's never, like, he's normally napping or something whenever somebody brings it up. Which is kind of weird. Now that I think about it, it's weird that nobody ever, you know, just asks him. And it's been a while since I've seen the papers, but it's some specialty rank that hasn't existed. Who knows how long it hasn't existed, honestly. But while he was in military, he got this really weird phone call one day while he was at home with my grandma and my mom and her siblings. And in this phone call, this guy that my grandpa doesn't know, he doesn't know how he got the number, this guy asks him to meet somewhere for breakfast it's like a 2-hour drive away. At that point, a little more. And he asks him to meet for breakfast, and this mystery man says that he'll pay for the breakfast. My grandpa just has to show up. And my grandpa, he doesn't know why he did this, but he just decided, yeah, sure, I'll meet you. Free breakfast, why not? And my grandpa goes and he meets this guy. And this guy is just sort of, he's asking a lot of really weird questions. And he's asking a lot about my grandfather's work in the military. So my grandfather, of course, he thinks this is sus. And he decides he's just gonna, you know, it's suspicious, this dude's asking so much. about our military and what sort of explosives they have. And my grandpa was like, okay, whatever, he's weird, still free food. So he decides to stay and he decides to eat his food and he's like as vague as he can be to this man. And isn't really giving him much to go on because, first off, that's treason. I think. I'm pretty sure that would be treason. And secondly, he doesn't know this dude. He's not about to screw over his country. This guy just sort of keeps pressing. So eventually my grandpa's done eating and this guy's still asking questions. And for some reason my grandpa he isn't quite ready to leave yet until this guy just sitting there chatting and this dude, my grandpa catches a glimpse of this guy's tongue. And the way my grandpa described it was that this guy had a split tongue like a snake. Well, according to my brother, because my brother told me about this after our grandfather told him because it was so strange. So it was just such a strange story. And as soon as my grandpa sees that split tongue, he's like, okay, I gotta leave. I gotta get out of here. This dude ain't human. But it was like 70s to 80s, so that wouldn't have been something that you would just see. You know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't be too strange to see that today, but back then, I don't know how many people were willing to get their tongue split. But this guy, he didn't want to let my grandpa leave too soon, because he still wanted some information. But eventually my grandpa gets out of there, and he goes home, where he, for whatever reason, doesn't tell anyone about this story until, I want to say 2013. It's been a few years since my grandpa told my brother the story. He kept that secret for a while. And he just randomly one day told it. Supposedly he never told it to his kids. Which, there's still time for that. But I highly doubt he will ever tell that to his kids. But that's the story of my grandfather meeting an alien. That's how my grandpa rationalizes it. Guess he's never heard of lizard people. I'm sorry, every once in a while I really need to focus. But that's the only supernatural encounter that my grandparents, either one of them, has told me from my mom's side. But I have a few supernatural stories that I could tell. I'm actually going to make a video about one of them. I'll probably record it later today. I'm going to try to have it up on either the 30th or 31st. Fingers crossed that I don't screw up and, miss some videos like I've done the last week or two. And, the many times before that. I'm very bad at just recording. I love to do it. I love to make YouTube videos, but I'm bad at just recording. So I have a lot of stories of just sort of having a lot of shadows in the night. I've woken up several times. Back home, I woke up several times between the ages of, I want to say, 4 and 18. I woke up a lot to just see figures standing over me. Normally blinking gets rid of those figures. There was one that I distinctly remember that stood in my doorway. It was just sort of standing, and it didn't have eyes, but I could feel it staring at me. And it had a top hat. I distinctly remember the top hat, and it wouldn't go away. I ended up getting my cell phone and turning on my flashlight and shining it out, and then after I put my phone away, it was there again. I've had that sort of thing happen a lot. I have one kind of wholesome, sort of supernatural sort of story. When I was little, around 4 years old, I would get up every morning when my brother left. My mom would leave with my brother to take him to school and for her to go to work. I would wake up around the time they were getting ready to leave because Dragon Tales would come on at 8 o'clock. And that was my favorite show. I was up watching it every morning. And a lot of mornings my dad would end up doing stuff in the bedrooms, and I would just be chilling in the living room watching. And I distinctly remember after my dad would leave the room, I would see this man in late 20s, early 30s, just sort of sitting on the couch. And this man, he always looked like my dad. He looked quite a bit like my dad, and quite a bit like my uncle, but just different than both of them. Extremely similar, but just a little different. And I never had any idea who this man I would see was for the longest time. And I didn't get any idea, actually, until I was about 10 years old, when I first saw a picture of my grandfather, who died in the 80s. But I would see my grandfather, and he'd just sit there and he'd watch me. He always looked really happy to be sitting and watching me. Trying to think of other stories I can tell, and for some reason, the only one I can think of right now is a story from high school that I was planning on making a different video for, but honestly, I might as well tell it right now. So, if anybody has played the game Charlie Charlie, I have. And if you don't know what Charlie Charlie is, basically it's this, like, it's basically like a psychological horror sort of deal, where you just get, there are two people involved. Both people take one pencil in each hand, and they stick they have to be unsharpened, and they stick the ends together. And there's something you have to say, I can't quite remember what it is, but it starts with Charlie Charlie. And basically you gotta ask Charlie if he wants to play or something. And it's so weird, the game is. But I played it when I was 16, I believe. And it was this big thing where people were doing the challenge and posting it on Twitter, a bit on Facebook, a lot on YouTube. Actually, you should just look up Charlie Charlie. You'll probably find a video about it. And so we went into a dark room at school, me and a friend of mine did, and there were actually a couple of the boys that we were friends with there too. And she wanted to play, and I was just sort of like, why not? Let's do it. So we took the pencils into a room, shut off the lights, shut the door, and started playing. And we started playing, we started asking questions. And the pencils started moving. I believe it's out for yes, in for no. And we played it several times. The first time, my friend got freaked out, and we decided to end the game. And every time you end the game, you have to ask permission to leave. And ask until the pencils go to yes. Once the pencils go to yes, both people are supposed to drop the pencils, and they have to drop the pencils at the same time. And then you've close the portal. I'm gonna be honest, the game did kind of freak me out, not in the moment of playing it, but the aftermath freaked me out. Because at one point one of the guys decided he wanted to play, and you're supposed to be very civil during the game, because you're supposed to be talking to a dead kid. They started asking questions like, is this really Charlie? And the answer was no. And is this a demon? And the answer was yes. So yeah, it was a bit freaky. The guy got very explicit in his speech. Said something along the lines of, oh heck no, except not heck. Threw down the pencils in the middle of the game, which is a major no-no. And he did that when the answer was yes to demon. And the friend I had played with, she made him play again. Because, you know, you want to end it properly, you want to end it nicely. And she made him play again. She made him play and keep hold of the pencils. And the first thing she asked was, she asked if the being was mad, and the answer was yes. She asked if the being was mad at her, and the answer was no. She asked if the being was mad at the friend, and the answer was a very quick yes. That was, I believe, the fastest time the pencils moved, was to say yes, the being was mad at him. And he was very upset at this. He once again got pretty explicative. And then she kept trying to get a yes, you can leave. The answer was always no. And she'd ask if it's because of him, and the answer would always be yes. And eventually, they finally got a yes, you can leave, and dropped the pencils, and we were done with it. That was the last game played, as far as I can remember. There might have been one more with me and her playing, but that was definitely his last game. Because he stormed out of the room. I think we did play again to ask if people were gonna be followed, and the answer was a resounding yes. It was yes to everything. So needless to say, you know, a bunch of teenagers got pretty freaked out, and what happened after didn't help. So we all went on our merry ways. I talked to this guy, my prom date for the year, actually. I talked to him afterwards. He was like, why the heck would you do that? Why would you play that game? You're just inviting demons and dark beings into your life. And I was just sort of thinking, okay, you knew we were playing this, and now you're saying all this crap. You didn't want to say it before we played the game, only after? Okay, dude. And so we all went home, all went to our homes, and I got a very freaked out text at about, I want to say it was like 11 p.m., maybe a little later, because the girl had gone to take a shower. And she got out of the shower. No, sorry, she had just gotten into the shower. And this razor. Oh wait, no, she hadn't gotten in yet. She was about to get in the shower, and this razor just sort of flew off the shelf at her. It was in the shower, she was not. And a razor flew off the shelf at her. And she took her shower anyways, and then she messaged me when she got out about what had happened there. And she was very frantic, because, you know, a razor just flew at her. So she's kind of understandably freaked out, especially with the game that we played. And how things ended up being left earlier that day. And I haven't played since, because stuff got really creepy. I ended up I ended up with the most minor sort of things. I was lucky. She had the razor fly off at her, and that was it for her. And we were gonna mess around with a Ouija board. We had plans to get a Ouija board that her aunt and uncle had stored away in a shed, because she lived with her aunt and uncle. They had a Ouija board in the shed that they told her she wasn't allowed to touch, and they only keep it so nobody plays it. Weird reasoning, but I kind of also get it, because of some freaky things that had happened when somebody played it before. And this Charlie game's the reason we didn't try to dig out the Ouija board and play. So it was the next best thing. But that was all that happened to her. The guy friend that had been cussing up a storm, he saw a lot of like shadows and stuff moving around, and he started hearing like something whispering that was gonna kill him in the night. And nobody in his household knew we played the game. Nobody in my household knew we played the game. Nobody in Jackie's household knew we played. It was just us that knew we played, and like two other teenagers knew. None of us. Well, I knew where she lived. She knew where I lived, but none of the others knew where anybody else lived. And he ended up being very freaked out because of the whispering in the shadows. She ended up being very freaked out because of the razor. I ended up being very freaked out because of... I had this, like, overwhelming sense of dread when I tried to go to sleep. And I would see shadows, too, and I would, honestly, for almost a month after that, I would wake up right at 3 a.m. So I would wake up at the witching hour, which if you didn't know, 3 a.m. is the witching hour. And I would wake up at 3 a.m. to seeing shadows and crap, which was never any fun. The guy friend that played with us, he actually had mentioned being woken up at 3 a.m. and seeing shadows at, like, around his house, too. It was a very, very creepy time. And I have never played again. She has never played again. He has never played again. We all decided none of us would ever play again after what happened, because it was just too daggone freaky. A couple years earlier, me and the girlfriend and a couple of other girls decided to try to freak out. Like, we all did this team together. It was called the Raiders team with JROTC. And we had a competition that we went to on Halloween. The competition was on November 1st. So we took off on Halloween and went down there, and one of the girls, I think it was that friend actually, had brought special effects makeup. And we decided we wanted to scare the boys while they were all off at the pool. And that guy friend, his mom was actually our chaperone, like our lady chaperone. So you have to have a lady if you're going on an overnight trip if there are girls involved in an overnight trip. And she ended up sharing with us how growing up, he was always terrified of zombies. So we ended up doing a bunch of zombie makeup. And it was all really quick, and then we all had various hiding places throughout the cabin. We were all in one cabin. Girls had one section, and then there were two sections to the cabin. Girls had a section with 3 bunk beds. You have 3 bunk beds and a kitchenette area. And then there was a door, and that on the other side of the door was a bunch of bunk beds, and that was the boys' area. So we all hid in our area, because the boys had to go through our area to get to their area. And it took a while to get some makeup on. And we shut off the lights and started playing some kind of creepy music, just to set the mood, because, you know, why not? And I ended up hiding under the bunk bed that was beside the door to the boys' room. And we had discussed just sort of like hiding under there and reaching out and trying to grab the boys, like, by their ankles to scare them. Because we had discussed what would be the best way to scare them that wouldn't get us in trouble. So we ended up doing that. And it took we got positioned not long before the boys came in. And they turned on the lights, which completely ruined where the other 3 girls were hiding. One, I'm honestly very impressed, because she climbed underneath the sink and hid herself in the cabinets under the sink. These were all 3 pretty tiny girls, but still. still pretty daggone impressive to me to hide herself under the sink. But like I said, I was under the bed. And the guys get coming in. And they start saying how it's, like, not scary and how it's lame and stuff. And how none of us would be able to scare them because they knew where we all were. And this one guy was talking, like, mad crap when they were going on about how it was so lame and none of the girls could scare them. And he gets to where I'm hiding. And apparently none of them have seen me, despite where I'm hiding being parallel to the door. And I guess it's because there was a bit of a blanket that was drooped down. And he starts walking past, and I scare the heck out of him. Because I reach out and I just sort of smack his ankle and sort of pull it towards the bunk beds. And he, like, yelled and he almost kicked under the bed, which would have been bad because where his other foot was, he would have kicked me in the face. But he didn't. He stopped himself. But I gotta scare him. That's what mattered. It was actually a very weird time. There was another school not too far away from where our school was that was staying in the cabins beside us. And they were very rambunctious. We'll just say that. Which our boys were pretty rambunctious too. But at one point the guys decided they would raid the girls' cabin. The guys from that other school. They decided they would raid the girls' cabin, and they ran in, and they took all of the bunk beds, and dragged all of the bunk beds outside, and were throwing them around. Strangely enough, not the weirdest thing those boys did that night. I'm not gonna say the weirdest thing. It is not PG. I'm not entirely sure it's PG-13. I don't think that's PG-13. I don't know what the rating would be. Probably R, if I'm being completely honest. Because there was nudity. I didn't see it. The boys saw it. Luckily, all of the girls were gone getting pizza for our school. But that's probably rated R and not something I really think would be appropriate to say on this show. So, sorry for bringing that up, but you guys don't get to know that. I'm not sure you guys will ever get to know that. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you enjoyed this video. Let me know about your horror stories. What sort of supernatural beings have you seen? Have you met an alien? Let me know. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and have a happy Halloween, guys. Don't forget to check out this video and hopefully I'll see you guys later this week. Bye!